Welcome to NewsHour. China has pulled the plug on exports of rare metals critical to high-tech manufacturing, throwing a spanner in the works of US industry. From smartphones and electric vehicles to military kit and medical scanners, American firms are facing a new kind of supply chain pain, an economic attack designed to wound and weaken future growth. Factories may soon be forced to slow production or pay a premium for substitute materials if they can find them at all. Defence contractors, green tech firms and aerospace giants are bracing for impact as Beijing flexes its industrial muscle in the latest tit for tat with Washington. The timing just couldn't be more awkward for President Trump. Back in the White House and facing rising economic anxiety, his job approval has slipped to 43%, according to the latest USA Today Suffolk University poll. That's the lowest it's been since he returned to office in January. Hardly ideal when your central pitch is all about restoring American strength. Well, Trump's team insist they've got contingencies lined up, but as pressure builds across key sectors and voters grow jittery, this clash over critical metals isn't just a trade skirmish, it's a full-blown test of his economic credentials.
China has halted exports of key rare earth metals and magnets, threatening global industries that rely on them, including electric vehicles, aerospace, semiconductors, and military systems. The suspension, linked to new export licensing rules, has disrupted shipments at Chinese ports while the government finalizes a regulatory framework. Once in place, the new system could permanently block supplies to certain companies, particularly US military contractors. The crackdown follows heightened trade tensions and is seen as a retaliatory response to US tariffs recently introduced by the Trump administration. It restricts the export of 6 heavy rare earth metals, refined solely in China, along with the high-strength magnets made from them, which are crucial for electric motors, missiles, and AI-related hardware. China dominates the global market, producing 99% of heavy rare earth metals and 90% of rare earth magnets. The new rules require export licenses, but with no clear system in place yet, companies around the world face uncertainty over when or if supplies will resume. Some firms report it could take 45 days or more to obtain a license. While many Japanese companies have stockpiles, most US companies do not, raising fears of production halts. Enforcement has reportedly been inconsistent across Chinese ports, with some allowing limited exports and others blocking them entirely unless extensive testing proves compliance. The move signals China's willingness to leverage its dominance in rare earths to influence global supply chains and retaliate against Trump. Experts warn that a prolonged disruption could damage China's credibility as a reliable supplier and reshape international sourcing strategy.
Well, let's head over now to Newsweek's Peter Roth, also in Washington, D.C. Peter, always great to see you. Let's get into this then. How is China's rare metals ban interpreted inside that world of policy experts that you know so well? Is it about economic retaliation, do they think, or is it more a piece of sensible strategic positioning?
It's both, but I will tell you that for the China hawks in the Trump administration, they're all on their knees this morning saying, thank you, President Xi. Ever, there was a reminder of the dangers of relying on China for essential elements of the US supply chain. This is it. And it's a good thing that it's happened in a trade war and not in a shooting war.
So, looking at the Trump administration's response then, do you think that suggests long-term planning or more reactive crisis management?
I think it's reactive crisis management on the part of the Chinese. This is something they probably had another someplace, and they've pulled it out now thinking it's useful. America has been debating the need for a strategic minerals reserve since COVID, maybe a little bit before. This underscores the importance of the minerals deal that President Trump offered to President Vladimir Zelensky several months ago. America has been looking for alternatives to China to supply rare earth minerals, other critical components of things that go into the supply chain. I think we're probably a lot farther down that road than, for strategic reasons, government wants to let on. But there's another piece to this. China is dependent on U.S. industry to run its economy. The things that are manufactured in China are sold here. The phones, the television sets, the refrigerators, the other consumer goods, they're sold here. And if they can't make them in China, then that's a lot of Chinese workers that go unemployed, which increases the pressure on President Xi, who is facing the problem that America started to face 15 years ago. Baby boomers began to retire. An aging population supported by a smaller workforce, more people working, fewer people working to support more people living in retirement. That's a crunch. That's a crunch that Xi can't manage over the long term. So if America doesn't blink on this issue, it's a bigger problem potentially for Xi than it is for America, because we can always find other places to buy these rare earth metals. We can find or create other technologies. And some of them, particularly the ones that are involved in the green energy sector, really aren't important to this administration, because they regard the Biden push towards green energy as a huge mistake driven by government tax credits and subsidies, and not economic competitiveness or ability to provide baseload power. So the green energy piece isn't a problem. The consumer electronic piece is a problem, but we can get those goods elsewhere. We can get those metals elsewhere.
Now, a bigger problem for China, perhaps, Peter, but nevertheless, Mr. Trump has got his own challenges to deal with. It's always hard with approval ratings, isn't it, to pinpoint precise causation, but nevertheless, we have seen a drop in the president's approval rating. What should we read into that? What's causing it? And is it something that you think the administration will be worried about?
First of all, I don't think the administration worries about it at all. Trump's approval numbers are somewhere in the 40s. The USA Today poll had him at 43. There's another poll I saw last week that's end of last week that's had him at 47. That's still higher than it ever was in the first Trump administration. I think, too, that Trump doesn't really worry about his public opinion numbers. Certainly in the ego sense he does, but in terms of measuring his job performance, he's going to do what he's going to do, and he thinks at the end of the day it's going to pay off. He's not doing what he's doing to win approval in the traditional sense of what politicians do. He is playing to the MAGA base, the people who put him in office in 2024, which is a different coalition. It looks different than the group of people who put him into office in 2016. And I think that the decline in Trump's approval comes largely among independent voters who are reacting to hostile media reports of what Trump is doing. Now, let me be clear, and I think the people who have seen me on your channel before know, I'm not a fan of tariffs. Tariffs are taxes, and I hate taxes. But Trump's main message that the United States is locked into an unfair trading relationship with many of our partners, where they get their goods and services into this country for low cost, and we're blocked from other markets, or we are effectively blocked from other markets because of high tariff rates like 300% on poultry in Canada, is a problem that needs to be addressed. And the way we've tried to address it in my lifetime has been to negotiate free trade deals with zero tariffs. And there's been some success, but not enough. So the other alternative is, if you're going to tariff us, we're going to tariff you. And that's what Trump is doing. And that's why, depending on which White House staffer you're talking to, 50 to 70 countries that are on the tariff list have called the White House saying, hey, wait a minute, guys, let's have a conversation. Because our tariffs on them are painful. And we're a bigger, stronger, more diverse economy. We have the ability to outlast these other countries unless they get serious about bringing their tariffs down.
Yeah, I think that resilience is quite clear, Peter. And as you say, no doubt the tariffs will be in some way hurting China. Nevertheless, there is some dependency from a supply chain perspective on those Chinese materials. Looking ahead longer term, across the medium term, what is the strategy to try and reduce that dependency? Is it political? Is it about finding alternative sources? Give us your sense of the administration's thinking on that.
Well, the administration's thinking is it's the reindustrialization of America. I mean, that's a word they're starting to use, reindustrialization. That ignores some realities, like that many of the businesses that moved out of places like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and the vice president's home state of Ohio didn't move to Vietnam, Mexico, or China. They moved to Alabama, Kentucky, Georgia, Florida, and Texas, where the where the governmental structure is a lot more friendly to business. Tax rates are lower, regulations are less, government is less intrusive. And it's the tax competition in states that has had a major effect. But even that aside, the idea that there are critical materials, critical items being produced or even just assembled into their final package in a place like China, in a place like Vietnam. America got a shock during COVID when we couldn't get things that we were told suddenly that we needed. And we couldn't get them because the countries that made them were hoarding them, or they were using them themselves first and then letting us have what's left over. And so the political constituency for bringing business home is there. It exists. It is powerful. What doesn't yet exist is the political will to pay more for many of the things that would become more expensive if they were manufactured here in the United States. And so Trump needs a strategy, and he's pursuing that on the regulatory front to reduce the cost of doing business in America.
Very interesting indeed. Peter Roth from Newsweek, thank you very much indeed. Always great to get your analysis. Peter there joining us from Washington, D.C. China's halt on rare earth exports has rattled global markets, sending ripples through tech, energy and manufacturing. With prices spiking and supply chains under strain, the financial world is watching very closely indeed. From mining stocks to geopolitical hedging, the stakes are high.
Wall Street's main indexes ended higher on Monday, with the Dow and S&P 500 each gaining about 0.8%, and the Nasdaq climbing more than 0.6%. Shares of Apple provided a boost after the Trump administration removed smartphones and other electronics from its tariffs on China over the weekend. Shana Orsic-Sissel, founder and CEO of Bonrian Capital Management, said the iPhone maker is one of several tech companies she remains bullish about amid the recent market volatility.
For me as an investor, I'm looking at this market and I'm excited. You're never going to be able to pick the bottom. But what you do want to focus on are the names that you really liked before, trading much cheaper than they were and taking advantage of those opportunities. That may mean buying some today, and then if it goes down further, increasing that position. And for me, those are names like NVIDIA, Apple, Vertiv, Leidos.
U.S. companies have begun to report first-quarter results, and with tariff troubles looming, corporate executives may hold back on giving much guidance. Still, shares of Goldman Sachs rose after the bank reported higher first-quarter profit. Drug makers such as Eli Lilly and AstraZeneca gained after Pfizer said it would end the development of its experimental weight loss pill. And shares of Bristol-Myers Squibb fell in extended trading after the company said its experimental drug to treat a type of heart disease did not meet the main goals in a late-stage study.
Well, to unpack the market implications, investor risks and longer-term volatility, we're joined by Associate Professor of Finance at the University of New South Wales, Mark Humphrey Jenner. Mark, great to see you. A lot of people will be aware of the uncertainty that tariffs have caused, the turbulent, the volatility rather, in the markets. But give us your understanding of the immediate financial implications, specifically of China's export halt on these rare metals.
Well, firstly, thanks for. And in terms of the immediate impact of China halting exports, well, it's been interesting because the financial markets haven't really responded that much. They still have been in country. However, it isn't great news. So to put this in, about 80%, or the US, imports about 80% of its rare earths from China. And if they were to have, say, a 90-day supply cut of these rare earths, it would be 8% of US defense contractors' production lines. Furthermore, only 1% of all rare earths are recycled globally. And what this means is if China does, in fact, proceed with cutting off rare earths, which it appears they're doing, and it appears they're moving more toward a permit-type system, it would have significant impact on the United States. So just put this in context for the defense. So we're looking at an F-35 fighter jet. Well, that requires about 920 pounds of rare earths for its radars, targeting systems, and engines. So it would have a significant impact on manufacturing, in addition to electronics broadly. But that hasn't quite yet manifested in the broader financial markets, although perhaps the market a little bit for the full impact to be really coming through in the permit system.
And give us your view, Professor, on nationalism. We've seen, we've seen with the case with the UK, with other nations, this rush to protect strategic assets in light of the disruption that the trade war has created. What risks do investors face as governments consider this shift towards nationalisation, protectionism?
Well, I guess you've got the risks as an equity investor, so someone just trading in the market, but also someone investing directly in these assets. And the ones investing directly are, of course, bearing the greater risk, being less diversified and actually directly in these companies. Now, the major risk, for example, is simply your profits are cut off. So say, for example, we take a rare earth refinery in China. Now, say it had been premised on the idea of being able to export to the United States for the use in renewables or the use in defense or the use in consumer technology. But then suddenly that's cut off. Well, then you simply have no profitability. And that's a real issue. Now, that's not just in China, but in other countries, China pursuing that type of policy. In Australia, for example, there's been proposals to retain natural gas, so LNG, within the country rather than allowing that to be exported, which of course would cut off the profitability or reduce it for many of those manufacturers. So the nationalism that pursues is going to impact profitability. In turn, that will affect equity investors and will affect them in different ways. So affect them based on whether the supply costs are going up, whether alternatively their revenues go down due to the inability to export things. Certainly not either way.
So where are we then in terms of the market assessment of this? Do you think that the current volatility has been adequately priced in, or has the long-term impact perhaps been underestimated?
Well, at the moment, we've gotten a bit of a relief rally on the tariffs being paused for 90 days. One does wonder whether that rally will reverse a bit when the tariffs are reinstated, which is going to occur. Now, exactly the magnitude, we don't know, but certainly they're going to reoccur to some extent. In addition, Howard Lutnick has flagged the idea of semiconductor tariffs, which will be coming up, but we don't know exactly what those are going to take the shape of, which means the market has not quite priced in a lot of these risk factors to the full extent they might occur. And one might wonder whether there's perhaps a little bit of calm, and maybe calm that surely be there about the size of the tariffs and about whether or not they're just going to be removed or reduced in order to calm the volatility. Now, President Trump certainly is not hugely enthralled by the market volatility, but he has shown no signs of tariffs on the back of the market declining. So one would wonder whether there's still further risks on the horizon, and those risks are likely to persist. We get to that 90-day period where the reciprocal tariffs are really reinstated in their semi-final form.
Professor Mark Humphrey-Jenner from the University of New South Wales in Sydney, thank you very much indeed for that insightful analysis. And
thanks for having me. It's great being with you.
There we have it. Both views from close to China and from the US as well. So China's halt on rare metal exports has sent ripples through the US industry, with defense, tech and green energy sectors all bracing for disruption. The White House is reportedly considering emergency measures, though details do remain thin. Meanwhile, President Trump's approval has slipped to 43%, adding political weight to an already fraught economic moment. Markets are jittery, advisors appear divided, and analysts warn this could mark a turning point in America's industrial reliance on Beijing. Thanks for joining us here on NewsHour, and from everyone on the team here in Baku, goodbye for now.